Thanks everyone for joining us. It's nice to see a few people joining, nice to see some names that we can recognize. I hope you found this session useful. My name is Hassel Tayyar from vNEXT, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. And I have the awesome Nabil Siddiqui with me here to take you on this journey of apps modernization today. Probably before we start, I would love to have this session interactive. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to ask in the chat window. And would love to hear your ideas, thoughts, observations, or any concerns you might have. Probably before we start, it's worth giving you an idea of who we are. So my name is Hassel Tayyar. I work as the director for vNEXT. We are an innovative consulting company based in Melbourne, Australia. I'm also a Microsoft Azure MVP. I've been working in this field for 15, 20 years. I've been working on Microsoft Azure since the early days, probably 7, 8 years. I've delivered a number of award-winning projects for a variety of industries, from financial services, big banks, to utility, energy, medical, and the likes. I've also written books, presented at conferences, local and international. And as a company, vNEXT, we focus on Microsoft Azure Cloud predominantly, really. Everything that we do is on apps, data, and IoT. We help customers innovate and accelerate innovation on Azure. I'll stop at that, and I'll hand over to Nabil. Nabil, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Has. Hi, everyone. I'm the Cloud Solution Architect working across Australia and New Zealand, across all the industries. I have recently published a book around microservices, and my focus area is around application innovation, DevOps, and open source. This is what I love doing. I have been in the industry for almost 20 years now, and I have worked on a variety of applications in terms of building distributed applications and desktops, all sort of applications. I have been helping customers in Microsoft in the last 4 years to help them digitally transform on our platform. Back to you, Has.
Excellent. Thanks, Nabil. So with that introduction out of the way, let's start talking about app modernization. How this session came about was really casual conversation that we were having with a few of our friends at Microsoft, and we observed that there is a common theme. Few topics, few questions, few concerns that keep coming back again and again with conversations that we're having with our customers, and the same was being observed by Microsoft. So some of these would sound familiar. So customers would tell us it's taking us too long for us to push changes to our web application. Some customers that I've spoken to, they were telling me that deployment might take days, and sometimes there would be issues that would take a week or so to resolve. This might sound relevant to you, maybe not. Another topic that came regularly was our infrastructure is too hard to patch, too hard to maintain, and it's costing us too much. A lot of organizations maintain some part of their infrastructure on-prem, or they use IaaS offering. If you don't know what that means, it's infrastructure as a service, which means that you look after the VM. You go all the way down to the operating system, which means that you are responsible for patching, upgrading, maintaining, securing your environments. So a common concern or a common topic that comes with our customers, and the same that we heard from Microsoft, is that our infrastructure is too hard to patch, it costs us too much, and it's not easy to maintain and push changes to. Another topic that we hear time and time again is customers are trying to innovate, trying to add new features, create a competitive advantage in an increasingly changing world, and they want to add new features, whether that's using data-driven decision making or infusing some AI and intelligence into their applications. Sometimes that could be for optimization purposes, sometimes that's for generating new revenue streams. And the concern there is that because they have legacy applications, it's very hard to infuse this intelligence or AI into it. Another topic that we hear when something goes wrong, it takes so long for the IT teams in these organizations to restore services back, which creates a lot of disruptions in businesses, and obviously nobody wants to have these. So these are the themes or the topics that we have seen and we hear from our customers. And a lot of these can be really mitigated by looking at modernization strategy by moving into the cloud. Obviously, Azure, Microsoft Azure have been at the forefront of this, and it has a lot to offer there. So we thought that we'll partner with Microsoft and deliver this session. So I hope that some of these topics might be relevant to you. It might sound interesting or resonates with you well, and that's why we'll get into the topic of apps modernization.
I'll take
Nabil?
it.
Yep.
Sure. So, I mean, these days, whenever I talk to any of the customer, they talk about how we can digitally transform ourselves. And what we have seen in the organizations that the companies who are doing it or who have done it, they are reaping the real intangible benefits. And the positive outcomes are truly amazing for them. Customers, now they have realized that their future success does depend on making this transition a success for themselves. In a study, 91% of the business leaders, they see digital transformation as a way of igniting innovation and finding the efficiencies for their organization. 85% of them say that, okay, we need to build some or offer sort of some digital services, or otherwise they become irrelevant or being disrupted in the industry. Can we move to the next slide? So what we have observed is that the organizations that are really successful doing that are the ones that look at their vision, their culture, their strategy, and their unique potential along with their capabilities as the foundational elements first, and then turn to the technology with a specific role in their mind. A lot of these organizations are looking at their application portfolio, identifying strategic assets across the organization, transforming those capabilities to be digital native. Further, what they do is to harness the data and apply some artificial intelligence to create value for their customers and eventually differentiation in the market. So that's what a lot of organizations are doing. In a sense, what these organizations are able to achieve is their ability to experiment more often with less investment upfront and use technology as the enabler for their innovation. Over to you, Has.
Thanks, Nabil. So that was a good flavor based on or a good synopsis of what's there, what's happening, what we find from research, and what industry leaders are telling. If we try to break this down a bit more in terms of what application modernization really is, what application modernization really is, according to Gartner, application modernization really focuses on the migration of legacy applications to new applications or platforms. Think of it as you have an application that you have been running in-house. It might be running .NET 3, for example, or it might be running Python 2. And now you are trying to add new features to it. You are trying to infuse AI. You are trying to move into a new infrastructure that's based on PaaS offering or SaaS offering from Microsoft. So when we talk about app modernization, we're really talking about migrating these legacy applications so that they are sitting on new modern platforms, modern infrastructure, modern frameworks to make it easier and possible for you to add features, make changes, and reduce that time to market. It's critical that we understand when we're talking about application modernization that there are a wide variety of approaches or options that are available in modernization. So, for example, the the example application that I talked about earlier, if you have a web application that you're running locally using .NET 3.0, for example, or Python 2, you could Dockerize that. You could use some of the tools that Microsoft provide and take that and package it as a Docker container and just push it into the cloud. So that's what's called lift and shift. You could also re-platform, or you could just rehost. So basically, you could just take your app and host it in Azure or other cloud providers as well. You could totally recode your application. Your application might be very old, very out of date, out of support, for example, and you might have to recode a lot of these. You might be able to do minor architecture changes. The point that I'm trying to make is it's not always a major undertaking by trying to leverage these benefits or taking advantage of these benefits on Azure. Sometimes it might be even a simple exercise, and we'll see a couple of use cases that talk through that. Sometimes it might be a lot of work, and sometimes there is a way around that takes you halfway in between, where you are still taking advantage of the investment you have made in your existing application, but you are able to take advantage of the agility and the performance and scalability that Azure offers. So now we understand what application modernization is. Why should you care? Why would you be listening to a conversation about application modernization? Well, the first thing that, or the first benefit that you can realize is actually cost reduction. We are not talking about small cost reductions. We are not talking about 5% or 20%. We are talking about upwards of 50%. And we'll look at a case study that we done for a project that we have done for a customer recently, where we reduced their cost by about 50%. Moving from IaaS infrastructure or on-premise infrastructure into a PaaS infrastructure or a SaaS infrastructure with proper automation around it can help you boost productivity and reduce total cost of ownership. So that's not just the cost of hosting or the cost of the infrastructure, but hiring, maintenance, patching, and all that. The other benefit that that you can realize is you can accelerate innovation. So some of the concerns or the topics that we talked about earlier, where customers are telling us it takes so long for them to make changes and then push it into the production environment. By modernizing your application, you're reducing that cycle. And it's exactly the point that Nabil was showing earlier from what's happening in the market and the research that we're seeing from leaders in the business. When you modernize, when you take advantage of Azure Agility, what you are doing, you are improving your ability to experiment, push changes faster, and pivot if something doesn't work. So there are a lot of hypotheses in the business, and you're trying to test those and push changes to the to production environment, push changes to customers quickly. And that's a key advantage that you're going to have. One customer that we worked with recently, we reduced their deployment time from 3 days or 4 days every deployment. We reduced that into about 20 minutes or 25 minutes. That's a massive difference. Another thing or another benefit that you would get from application modernization is the improved security and compliance. If your application is running on a virtual machine, whether that's on your local premise or on a premise locally for your data center, or it's running in a cloud provider, you are responsible for patching and securing your environments. You are responsible for configuring a lot of the networking and the security features around it. By modernizing and taking advantage of PaaS services along with automated pipelines, you are reducing your risk and improving your security and compliance. And that's a big plus, especially if you are running in an infrastructure, if you are running in a highly regulated environment where you might be running in, you might be part of a financial industry, you might be running your workload in a critical infrastructure if you are in a utility or energy. And these are massive benefits that you can realize. Another improvement is the improved customer experience and engagement. Customers tend to expect a lot from their service provider. How many times do you install an application, and if it's laggy, you delete it straight away, or you interact with a website, and if you see that it's lagging or the user interface is not easy to understand, you just move away. Every customer that you have is an opportunity for you to innovate, and by modernizing and taking advantage of Azure agility, you are taking a step further in creating a competitive advantage for your business. And that goes a long way. That can translate into significant dollars in retaining customers or gaining new customer segments. And lastly, increased reliability. A lot of customers that we talk to, they might have their application running somewhere and it's running on virtual machines. But if something happens, if that virtual machine corrupt, or if that database is down, the whole system goes offline. By taking advantage of modern cloud, Azure is the topic that we're talking about here. Is you could replicate your data across regions with a simple click. There would be a small cost increase, but that cost increase is very minimal compared to what you would pay if you were running on an infrastructure locally, for example. So hopefully by going through this, I've given you a flavor of or a view of what benefits can you expect from an application modernization and why should you care. So we talked about the benefit. What are some of the challenges that customers are facing when it comes into application modernization? One key challenge that we see time and time again, especially when you talk to business leaders, is the planning and estimation for migration projects can be hard. And this is especially true for customers or organizations that are running in a waterfall environment. If you're trying to lock everything into the dollar from the get-go, that's going to be hard. One way to minimize that or to mitigate that risk or improve outcomes here is to use an agile approach. If you, instead of trying to approach 50 applications at a time, maybe if you take one application, migrate that, see the benefits, resolve any networking, resolve any security issues, and then try to go back into the second application and the third application. And we do see that common. A request that we got from a customer not long ago, about 2-3 months ago, they were asking us, we did a really good job with one application, and they came back and they said, can you help us migrate these applications? And we said, okay, how many applications are we looking at? And there was about 50-55 applications of those. So that's not going to be a wise thing to do. So what we did, we take a step back, and then we looked at 2 or 3 applications that we were able to migrate initially, and then we would be able to iteratively move the remainings forward. Another challenge that we see, the lack of in-house capability, and it's a very common thing. A lot of organizations, they have their IT admin staff or people who are responsible for infrastructure, but they are really coming from system admin background, or they might have not worked with a cloud platform before, so it might be a big learning curve and a challenge for them. And one way that we see to overcome this challenge is one, by working with partners like vNEXT, where we are quite collaborative. We work in an agile way. We try to embed ourselves within our customer team, and we really try to work hand in gloves with their technical team. This not only helps us in deliver real value and reduce risk, but it also means that there is knowledge transfer and there is opportunities for your teams to overshadow or to shadow and to work closely with our team members. So it's beneficial for both parties, and we hope that at the end of the engagement, then your team have gained a lot of the knowledge that is required for supporting the platform. Another thing that's worth mentioning here is a lot of the resources are now available online, and they are mostly free, whether that's from Microsoft or from just public resources on the internet. A lot that's there, that's available for your team to learn and develop. And lastly, a lot of business leaders, a lot of customers are telling us that they are concerned about security and risk when it comes into migrating and modernizing their application. It's probably coming from the misconception that if your application or your infrastructure is running on your on-prem and you have a firewall, you are more protected than running in Azure, which is really a misconception. It's giving you that false sense of security because you have a lot more on your plate that you need to secure. By moving into Azure, you have a lot more leverage, you have a lot more levers and measures that would help you secure your environment. There are also tools that are available for you that does auto scanning. So if there is misconfiguration or if something wasn't done right, you could get an alert out of the box, which you don't have these in your on-premise. The other thing that you have is that by moving away from securing everything with a firewall to securing things with proper identity and proper automation, you are reducing that that attack surface, and you can improve that with time. So by keeping everything behind the firewall, if that one gate got compromised, then you lost the battle. But by moving into identity and using proper role-based access authentication, then you could reduce your risk significantly. So the point there is, by taking security requirement and involving the security team early on and taking advantage of the security features that are available in public cloud like Azure, you could improve security and reduce your risk in modernizing your application rather than the other way around. I'll hand over this to Nabil.
Sure. So the common practice that we see from our customers is first migrating their workloads from on-premise. Whenever they are moving or thinking about moving into the cloud, they have a set of on-premises application or the virtual machine running on their virtual machine infrastructure. What they do is that let's do a lift and shift, move these applications in the cloud. That's one way of doing it. That's what we've seen in the market, at least for the customers. But this is not always every customer do that. Some customers, they actually go and identify applications across the board and find out, okay, this is an important asset for me. There's a strategic asset for me. I need it to be cloud native, and let's modernize it before I move it. So there are a variety of ways how customers do it, but the common practice we have seen across the board is that let's do a lift and shift first. And once they do a lift and shift, the next thing that they do, okay, let's start modernizing. Start modernizing the application using the platform as a service offering from Microsoft, where you can go and containerize your applications and you get better efficiency and speed compared to your virtual machines. Now, as you move into the platform as a service, what you will be doing as a business, you will start building capabilities inside the organization. The capability to harness the services available on Azure to start creating the added advantage. What you can do is that you not only become more efficient, but you can innovate much faster by bringing your products to the market quicker. We have a variety of offerings on our PaaS platform, but what truly differentiates us is through the Power App service. This provides a self-service option to build apps with no code, which means that the citizens, developers can go and start building applications. They don't have to learn coding or programming and things like that, but they start contributing to the business, which means that what we are doing is that we are enabling anyone or everyone to build applications on their own terms. We'll move to the next slide. So with Azure, you can bring the power of containers, databases, or artificial intelligence to build end-to-end solutions or applications. Developers in your organization can build serverless solutions, and they can enjoy the freedom from infrastructure management. They don't have to go and manage those infrastructure by themselves, regardless of the application they are building and the technology that they are using. Your developers can choose from a range of serverless execution environments. They can go for a fully managed service or a comprehensive set of developer tools or services to build those applications. With Azure, you can run your apps on any device and offer a wide range of experiences to your customers using web, mobile, mixed reality, IoT, and media. Can we move to the next slide, Hess? So the next question that you have to face is that, okay, I have a set of application that I have selected. Now I have to move into the cloud. What is the best hosting platform for me? And in your organization, you may be running some commercial off-the-shelf software, or you have a set of application that has been built by in-house developers or by the vendors or the partners. And you need to decide that how I have to move these applications in the cloud. Do I have to migrate? Do I have to build a new one? And it depends on your priorities, whether it's what sort of an application is this. Uh, you can go with lift and shift. And here you need to decide on, okay, can I containerize that application or not? If I cannot containerize that application, then probably I just need to do a lift and shift in a virtual machine. If it is a commercial off-the-shelf application, you need to talk to the provider and ask them to, do you have a container offering? If they have a container offering, that's great. You can just say, okay, I will be using your container offering and I'll be moving in something like Azure App Service. Let's say if you are not going to migrate that application, you thought about building a new one, then you have a whole lot of decisions that you need to make. The first one is that, do you require full control over the infrastructure as a business? Your application needs it or not? And if you don't need it, then that's fine. But if you need it, you have to host it on a virtual machine because that gives you more knobs and levers to play with. The next question that you need to answer is, okay, is it a high performance compute workload? If it is a high performance compute workload, then probably you go and use Azure Batch Service. If it is not a high performance compute service, the next question you need to answer is, okay, is it an application that is built on microservices architecture? If it is not on a microservice architecture, then okay, let's go host in Azure App Service. But if it is a microservice architecture, there's another question that you need to answer is around whether that microservice application is an event-driven application or not. If it is an event-driven application, then probably would prefer to host it in Azure Functions. If it is not the case, then it's it's a microservice application that does synchronous communication between different microservices. Then you can think about either going with an orchestrator or going without an orchestrator. And again, you need to decide whether you really need an orchestrator. And if you don't need an orchestrator, Azure Container Instance is a great place to start with. Quickly, you can spin up containers and you can host your applications. But if you want to host or you need to work with a orchestrator, there is another set of questions that you need to answer. Do you want to manage the orchestrator by yourself? Do you have the capabilities in-house to do it by yourself? Or do you have the reason to do it? If you come up with a reason, yes, I need an orchestrator and need to have the control over the orchestrator, then what you can do is that there is plenty of options. You can host it on Kubernetes cluster on VM, Azure VM. You can host your OpenShift cluster on virtual machines, and you can host your VMware Tanzu on Azure VM as well. But I think one thing that you need to remember that you need to manage the orchestrator and the platform by yourself. A lot of customers don't go for that option until unless they have a specific reason. What they do is that they go for the managed offering that we have in Azure. And even when you go to the managed offering, there are plenty of options available there as well. We have Azure Service Fabric, Azure Spring Cloud, Red Hat OpenShift, and Azure Kubernetes Service. And then you have to make a decision. Okay, if you have a legacy application that is built on .NET framework, older legacy one, and you want to move it into the cloud, then probably the easiest option for you is to use Azure Service Fabric, like WCF services, or if these services are talking to each other, probably what you can do is that just move your applications or your workloads into Azure Service Fabric. If that's not the case, and if it's a Java application and it's been built using Spring Cloud, then what you can do is you can think about using Azure Spring Cloud. That is a managed offering. That is an orchestrator that has been provided by Microsoft. You don't have to manage it by yourself. And what you can do is that you can just bring your Java applications, Java Spring Boot applications into Azure Spring Cloud. If it is not a Java application, or even if it's a Java application, you need to decide on, okay, I need to use a different orchestrator just because I have Red Hat capabilities across the board. The team inside my organization, they're more familiar with Red Hat OpenShift. Then you can say, okay, I'll just spin up a Red Hat OpenShift cluster in Azure that is managed by Azure, and I'll just go and host my workloads there. And if that's not the case, then you can think about hosting your workloads in Azure Kubernetes Service, which is an upstream version that Microsoft hosts as a managed service. And you can go and host a variety of applications, whether it's Java, .NET, whatever it is. The beauty of hosting things in container is that you can host anything. So this is how you should be making a decision whenever you are going to choose a compute. Similar options are available for databases and other services on Microsoft documentation. So I would encourage you guys to have a look at it. These articles have recently been published and I found it really useful, and I think you guys will find it useful as well. Also want to touch on the learning side that Has mentioned earlier. There is a lot of investment that Microsoft has made in that particular area around enterprise scale initiative. There is Microsoft Learn that you can go. There is a partners. We offer discounted partner trainings. There's Microsoft documentation that is very comprehensive. There is Azure Architecture Center. We do workshops, open hacks, all that kind of stuff. I mean, what I would encourage you to do is to connect with your specialist and let them know that you are interested in learning more. Back to you, Has.
Excellent. Thanks, Nabil. It's really important, and I don't want to bore you with going into more details, but it's really important and critical that if you are migrating your application, you need to understand the trade-offs between the different services and the decisions that you make. Because if you want to realize the benefits that we talked about earlier, it needs to be done right. It needs to be a well thought approach. And that would help you in the long run. It sets you up for taking advantage of your investment. That's why we thought that this flowchart would be critical for you to understand. Okay, so we've covered quite a few grounds. Probably if we change gear and talk about a couple of the customer stories that that we have worked with as vNEXT. So one customer that we worked with recently is Zenith Investment Partners. They are a large company in the financial industry. They build a range of products that are used by financial advisors and the likes. The company has a major footprint on Microsoft Azure. They acquired a new business, and they wanted to move all their applications and infrastructure from the other companies' AWS subscription into their Azure. So we were engaged. They have a very aggressive timeline because of the contractual agreements and the nature of the acquisition. And vNEXT was engaged to help with the application modernization and then migrating that into Azure. So to start with, the application has a number of APIs and front-end applications. They were all hosted on a couple of large virtual machines on Amazon using really beefy VMs. As you can see, 48 virtual cores and about 100 gigabyte of memory. And they were taking advantage of MySQL database on Amazon. So what this is showing is although they were running in the cloud in Amazon, but they were really running as an infrastructure as a service. And because they were bundling all their APIs and all their applications into these two VMs, they really had to scale them all together, which means that it's harder to maintain. There is the potential to bring the whole system down by making a simple mistake with one deployment. It's not easy to scale because if you wanted to scale, you have to scale the whole virtual machine, which is costing a lot of money. So as you can see, there are a lot of issues. To add to that, the identity and authentication and security were managed on AWS. So as part of the migration, we didn't want to take it as a lift and shift and move it into virtual machines because that's really not going to give the long-term benefits to the customer. So what we looked at, we did a very quick experiment to see, can we take this application, break it down into the different components and APIs and run them as individual Azure app services. And that was the first thing that we did. And that was successful. So we split that into 3 different Azure App Services, 2 for the backend APIs, one for another API that sits in the front, which would also host the front-end application. And then we used Azure MySQL database. Once we confirmed that that was successful within a week or so, then we started taking this further. So now that we have this successful, so we started integrating it into a virtual network. We started taking advantage of private endpoints. And the reason for that, private endpoints are great for security, ensuring that all these components are secure and they talk between themselves. They are not talking over the public cloud, so you can have peace of mind in terms of security. But they also help with performance as well, because now that the database is sitting outside of the local host of the virtual machine, now we need to make sure that the performance between the database and the app services is reliable. So that's where we use private endpoints. So you can think of private endpoints as a way of improving your security, your compliance, as well as giving you a performance boost. So once we have done that, now we have an application that's running in pre-prod, and it's good and reliable. So what we have done, we added Azure API management to help with managing the integration. They had a number of API clients, customers that were using the APIs from these applications. So we introduced Azure API Management Service to help with managing these APIs and ensuring security monitoring and the likes. And then to make sure that the customer has a reliable and resilient environment, we did a geo-replication. So we replicated the whole deployment in another region, region B. So this is in region A, this is in region B. You can think of it as this is Melbourne region, this is Sydney region. Again, there is another APIM that's sitting in front of this other deployment, and then there is an Azure front door that's really controlling and routing the traffic between the two environments. And then all this is really stitched together and controlled and managed by full suite of automation using CI and CD pipeline. It's interesting that a lot of people talk about CI and CD, which is continuous integration and continuous delivery, but the reality of it is really you need beyond that. You need continuous integration, you need continuous delivery, you need continuous testing, and you need continuous monitoring. Without all these four, you might be taking a step in the dark. All this work was done within a matter of weeks, and the customer was able to go from the vendor AWS subscription into their own Azure subscription, moving into a production environment and offering their customers the service that they already have available for them. So what were the results? The customer was able to go into production in Azure in a matter of weeks, which is quite remarkable. Massive performance improvements, security, and compliance. And this is really documented by feedback that we got from the customer, and they got us to come back and do a lot of other modernization for other applications that they have. Reduced costs. As you saw, we moved from massive virtual machines into small app services. And what that means is not only improved reliability and ability to push changes faster, but also it meant that you can scale components individually. And when you scale one app service, you could double your investment and it's still going to add $100. But if you have a beefy virtual machine that's 100 core or whatever, then that's going to add a few $1,000s, potentially a few tens of thousands of dollars every time you scale up. And lastly, improved substantial gains in reliability. As you saw, moving from virtual machines into geo-replicated environment, that gives the customer peace of mind that even if the whole Melbourne data center shut down, they won't be impacted because they have an active type of deployment with a fully replicated environment in the Sydney data center. So that was one case study. Another case study that we did with another utility company, a large utility company, where we started by helping them with their digital transformation and their IoT platform. But soon we saw some of the common patterns that we see with other customers, where there is a lot of frictions, deployment take a long time. There is some complaints about costs are being too high. So again, we we used Azure DevOps. We worked with their team collaboratively, and what we were able to do, again, within really a matter of a few weeks or about a month, we're able to reduce costs by about 50%, improve performance by about 700%. Some of the work that we did there was quite innovative, and Southeast Water is patenting some of these patterns and solutions that we provided. But also what that brought to the customer is the ability to handle or manage new scenarios that weren't available before. So things like predictive maintenance, because now we have a lot of data. We are ingesting a lot of data from digital assets. So now you can do predictive maintenance rather than being reactive and waiting for something to break and then going to fix it. So again, what the results of this one were: significant performance improvements, like we mentioned, huge cost saving. We're talking about over 50% or about 500K per year. I mean, think of it, if you have a couple of applications that you modernize and you save 500K per year, you could use that investment by hiring a couple of more people, and you could innovate a lot more, add new features, provide better service for your customers, or generate new revenue streams. So it's not really small numbers that we're talking about here. Another thing that another benefit that our customer realized was significant improvements in terms of security and compliance. When we started, we had a third party come and do a security assessment, and they gave us the report. It was their risk posture or risk assessment was high, and we're able, after a few weeks of work, we're able to reduce that from high into medium. It's quite remarkable when you think of it, when you are reducing your risks significantly, improving performance and reducing cost at the same time. And it's a really no-brainer, because you are not really compromising something. You are improving your risk, or you're reducing your risk, you're improving performance as well as reducing cost, all at the same time. And lastly, significant and substantial productivity gain by reducing deployment time. So the customer can now make changes and see those replicated in production. So the time to value has been reduced significantly. There are also key investments that are available from Microsoft that can help you move with confidence. I'll let Nabil go through this in a bit more details. He has a bit more insight into this than I do.
Thanks, As. So there are a few programs that you guys can leverage. One is the Azure Migration and Modernization program that can help you with the acceleration of your cloud journey, where we provide some practice, guidance, resources, and we can bring some experts to help you as you start moving your workloads or you start building applications in the cloud. We can also help you in terms of finding a partner as well. Another resource that is an engineering investment, that is Fast Track for Azure, where you get the opportunity to work with the engineers. If you have a cloud project and you want to build that on Azure, what we can do is that we can bring Fast Track for Azure resources to help you guys in terms of designing and deploying those projects in the cloud. And there is a Microsoft Docs resource around well-architected framework. So this is a best practice, or you can say a guidance for customers and partners who want to build applications in Azure, and they want to make sure that their applications are reliable, secure, cost optimized, and they also take care of the operational excellence and the performance and efficiency. There is an assessment available if you are already running an application, and if you want to go through that assessment, the assessment can provide you some guidance. Okay, where are you lacking and what are the areas of improvement in terms of building a well-architected framework for your application. And then finally, the cloud adoption framework. It is specifically for those customers who are starting their journey and they want to know that how they can strategize, how they can plan, and how they can get ready before they can embark their journey in the cloud. Once they are ready, we can talk about bringing these programs like M program in terms of facilitating the adoption. We have resources in terms of helping you guys around governance and the management, and eventually around operational excellence once you are running those workloads in the cloud. Back to you,
Thanks,
Has.
Nabil. So the key takeaways that I hope that you would take out of this session is modernizing your application can help you reduce cost and accelerate innovation. Like we saw with other customers that are doing the same thing, you could bring significant cost reduction and reduce your time to value substantially. Modernizing and moving into Azure can help you boost security as well as improve reliability and governance. And lastly, we do have Microsoft funding or programs that Nabil just have taken us through. And we have one-on-one assessment that we are offering that we can help you if you have the need, or if you are thinking about modernizing your apps and data. We are happy to sit down and look at your scenario and offer you an assessment specific for your own needs. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. If anybody have any questions, I'll look at the chat window if there is anything. It doesn't seem that we have any questions. So we might give you 10 minutes back of your day. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions or you want to follow up, here is our website and our email. Would love to hear from you. If you have opted to the one-on-one assessment session, we'll reach out. We'll send you an email with the details, and then we'll organize a follow-up session. So thanks very much for your time, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much, guys.
Nabil.
Cheers.
Cheers.